Thank you, Philip, and good morning, everyone. Before I go into the June numbers and how we fared in the first half of year 2020, I would like to touch on a few developments since we met last month. First, Federal Maritime Commissioner Rebecca Dye and her colleagues recently developed a series of suggestions to improve fluidity in the San Pedro Bay Gateway. Several of you have reported on this. I fully endorse these recommendations and applaud the FMC and Commissioner Dye for the proactive, solutions-based approach to help ensure this complex continues to optimize efficiencies. Four areas were specifically noted. First, truckers should be allowed to return an empty container and chassis to the same terminal where the driver took delivery of an import container. When this is not feasible, terminals should give beneficial cargo owners and truckers at least 24 hours notice, but preferably 7 days advanced information. Second, terminals should strive for 7 days notice of gate closures, at a minimum 3-day advanced warning. Third, liner companies should provide at least 7 days notice on blank or canceled sailings. That information should be highly visible on carrier websites and other communications medium. Lastly, receiving dates for export shipments at terminals should be shared through greater collaboration between liner shipping companies, terminal operators, cargo owners, and truckers. I want to thank the FMC and specifically Commissioner Dye for spotlighting these opportunities. Some of our Los Angeles marine terminal operators have already implemented these steps, and I encourage all others in the San Pedro Bay complex to consider these opportunities. It is also important to note that truck turn times, according to the Harbor Trucking Association, are currently averaging less than 60 minutes in this gateway. That is the lowest it has been since the HTA began collecting data 8 years ago. While we always have room for improvement, I want to acknowledge our Los Angeles marine terminal operators, partner trucking companies, and so many others for their success in reducing turn times. Regarding increased collaboration, Peter Friedman, who leads the Agricultural Transportation Coalition, has been advocating for West Coast port stakeholders to work together to increase cargo lift and stop market share loss. He is 1,000% correct. Last month, I shared with you that I have assembled a group of West Coast business interests to answer the question of port competitiveness. We met again recently, and I had the opportunity to share my 9-point plan to bring cargo back here to the Port of Los Angeles. I also want to acknowledge a world record that was set in June at APM Terminal's Pier 400 right here in Los Angeles. Working on the Mediterranean shipping company's Isabella, one of the largest vessels in the world, the women and men of the International Longshore and Warehouse Union moved 18,465 containers during a single port stay. This record, equal to 34,263 20-foot equivalent units, is nearly 1,400 containers more than the previous record. Los Angeles has been successfully handling megaships since the year 2013. We remain big ship steady, routinely and efficiently handling these increasingly bigger cargo lifts. The Isabella record is quite an accomplishment, and I am grateful to all of our partners for their flawless efforts. Now, on to the June numbers. In the month of June, the Port of Los Angeles moved more than 691,000 TEUs, 691,475 to be exact. Given the circumstances, we're not in bad shape for the month of June. I'll take this number of 691,475 during the midst of an unsettled trade war and the global pandemic that we're working through today. Up against last year, which was our best June in the 113-year history here at the Port of Los Angeles, we began to see retailers replenishing omni-channel distribution inventories. Canceled sailings have slowed. Although we did see some vessel shift of services over to Long Beach, halfway through the year right now, we've improved just a bit, and are tracking 17% behind 2019 at the mid-year point. To give a little deeper look, our imports year to date are down 13.7%, and for the month, down nearly 7%. Exports continue to take a beating, down 21% in the month of June, and year to date, down nearly 18%. And a very important indicator for us is the movement and repositioning of empty containers. Compared to a 22% decline year to date, we were off only 7 percentage points in the month of June, meaning we're starting to see the evacuation of empties to prepare for a modest uptick in imports in months to come. To put this all in context, for the San Pedro Bay ports, the month of June showed a 10% decline in volume compared to a very choppy 2019. And year to date, we also made subtle improvement to 12.5% decline versus the same period in 2019. A look for the first time here is my cargo projection for the Port of Los Angeles throughout the year 2020 on the calendar side. As you can see, since I first came here in 2014, we saw a steady increase of cargo volume to Los Angeles, although we did not keep up with national growth rates. We began to see the trade policy out of Washington impact us in the latter part of 2018 and full year 19. And now the double hit of the pandemic and the trade policy is in clear focus with levels of cargo volume not seen since the Great Recession. In other business at the port, I commented last month that our automobile sector would soon turn negative, and it did. Nationwide, our experts are only estimating sales of 12 million passenger automobiles and trucks. The outlook for this marketplace has not changed, and we're beginning to see that effect here in Los Angeles. Scrap metal and steel continue to be hampered by the tariff policy. Petroleum remains the same as most of us are telecommuting and not putting as much time on our freeways and roadways. Heating oil in the upper Midwest and East Coast is all but dissipated as we're now in our summer months. And the cruise business as we know it worldwide has shuttered. As I mentioned last time, our fruit season concluded a little bit early, but unimpeded by the pandemic, and we're watching very closely for a natural harvest to begin towards the end of November, beginning of December. Less cargo means fewer jobs here at America's port, and we're watching this very closely, where every job is important to our families, our children, our neighbors, and the well-being of our harbor enclave. Year to date, our labor shift work for our longshore groups is down 18% compared to the same time period in 2019. While closely aligned with the downturn in cargo, this is somewhat encouraging that labor work is not outpacing the cargo declines. In the all-important comparison of our 3.5-year average, we see that labor shift counts are down 12%. Again, trying to take out some of the choppiness from the tariff regime, we see a little better look versus normal cargo flow times, but still double-digit declines in our longshore labor work. For the balance of year 2020, we show that we'll be at levels at or below those witnessed during the Great Recession a decade ago. And please remember, it took us nearly 10 years to make up the cargo volume off the heels of the recession. We will not wait that long this time. The trade war and COVID-19 have wreaked havoc on global trade worldwide, including here at the nation's largest trade gateway. And we do expect 2020 volumes to come in below 8 million TEUs. And if accurate, that will equate to about a 15% drop in cargo volume compared to 2019. And that's why I have submitted my 9-point plan that I've outlined to improve upon and go after cargo as we try to help assist in some small way getting part of the 50 million Americans out of work back on the job. And that concludes my comments to open today's press conference. And Philip, I'll turn it back to you to seek any questions from the visiting audience.
Thank you, Gene. We do have a couple of questions that have been submitted in advance. If anyone who's on the call or the conference has a question, please either type it into the Q&A section and we will read it, or you can raise your hand. I see one hand raised, which we'll get to in a minute. We'll start with a couple of questions and then get to Dan Ronan, who has his hand raised. First question is from Lori Ann LaRocco of CNBC. Are there any updates as to whether the USNS Mercy would be returning to the Port of Los Angeles?
Lori Ann, no plans at this time, but the Port of Los Angeles stands ready. As interest by the Governor of California, Gavin Newsom, Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti, and Los Angeles County supervisors feel appropriate in their dialogue with the federal government and the United States Navy. But no specific outline has been received by the Port of Los Angeles at this time.
Thank you. The next question is from Jim Roop, Westwood One Radio. As I understand it, this is the time of year where shipments for the holidays begin to arrive into the ports of LA and Long Beach. How has the pandemic affected those shipments, and how will that affect available items on both store shelves and online stores?
I think inventory throughout the United States will continue to be solid. The retail, home improvement communities, and other folks that we shop and dine with for takeout service are very well prepared. We're starting to see a little bit of replenishment with respect to our omni-channel distribution network of warehouses and facilities that move the cargo to the store level. But what we are seeing is a miss on just about every season we normally cater to in this business. Fast fashion, or spring fashion as we would call it, has come and gone without real impact. The back to school season, now that we're starting to get some signals from the school districts, will not be anywhere near what we've witnessed in the past. And traditional peak season, which would normally start up in the month of August, will also be relatively flat, just simply because you and I are not out at the stores on a regular basis. But there is a tremendous amount of work that's taking place with internet sales, home deliveries, and parcel type services that will continue. And again, just for the general viewer, we're still moving about 80 to 85% of our normal cargo volume that we would witness at this time of year. And given the calamity that's been caused by both the trade policy and the pandemic, I'll take that for right now. But we still have much more work to do to bring people back on the job.
Thank you. Next question is from Eric Watkins, Lloyd's List. On August 1st, PurePass has announced that the traffic mitigation fees at the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach will increase by 4.2%. The Harbor Trucking Association has said that this will drive away business. What are your thoughts on this?
What we hear directly from the cargo owners, it's all of these fees that add up and assist them in deciding to move cargo through a four-corner strategy or port diversification programs. And there's no secret here, this has been a polarizing conversation. While on one hand, we have done a great job as a port community to split up how cargo in and out of this port complex during the day when we have normal peak travel periods and children are going to school, folks like us are going to work. There has been a move of cargo to the night side where there is less traffic on our freeways. But the cost associated with this continues to come under scrutiny from the logistics decision makers. And this is, again, one of the reasons why I put together the West Coast competitiveness team to dissect every cost, not just to cut rates and go back to a marketplace, but to find efficiencies in everything we do and model round trip and triangulated economics, make the value proposition that much stronger for the cargo owner to decide that this is the gateway of choice. But I will profess to you, we have much more work to do.
Thank you. Dan Ronan actually submitted his question, so I'll read this. This is Dan Ronan, Transport Topics. Earlier this week, California's governor received a letter from 52 organizations expressing concern that the California ports are in jeopardy of losing market share to East Coast facilities. They cited figures that show a 19.4% drop in West Coast port market share and action needs to be taken before California permanently loses jobs and revenues. As the leader of the largest port in the country, what are some of the immediate steps you're prepared or have taken to turn this around?
I've been talking about this since nearly day one when I stepped into this job. It is not an overnight revelation. And while it's great to see a number of folks trying to back us, this is work that we've been talking about for some time. Since the unfortunate labor lockout of 2002, we have lost 20% of our market share here in Southern California at the ports in the San Pedro Bay complex. Fact. Since we began to implement very, very heavy regulatory effect on environmental concerns, we have continued to see cargo owners diversify their shipments through different gateways. As we also have seen through the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund's antiquated look at how investment takes place, we have been collecting the lion's share of this tax and investing it in our competitors' ports on the East and Gulf Coast, as well as our river facilities. Now, there is some work on that final piece happening in Washington today, and we've got a lot to do to catch up. East and Gulf Coast ports have received 10 times the federal funding that has been received by West Coast ports over the last decade. $10 billion to $1 billion here on the West Coast. That has got to change if we are going to be more competitive. And I've outlined 3 areas of work with my colleagues across labor, the Employers Association, the West Coast container ports, and our 2 Western railroads. And that is simply, let's fine-tune our operations, continue to improve every day, and find new ways to move cargo more efficiently. Let's focus on our finances, from the great investments that we need in digital and physical infrastructure to the transactional cost compared to our competitors on the Atlantic and Gulf sides of the country. And lastly, we have to have alignment politically, policy-wise, and regulatory. I am not, and I will underscore this, not advocating that we roll back on the great environmental strides that we have made thus far since 2006. But what I am sharing is this is a high wire act to balance jobs creation, commercial interests, and what's in our DNA to be a leading proponent of environmental change worldwide. All 3 of those have to come into balance. And again, this is not a new revelation that has just been brought to the attention. Jobs have been lost to date. Had we simply kept up with U.S. market growth at the GDP level, on average, we'd be talking about 200,000 new jobs right here associated with the port complex in Southern California. That's not the case. That cargo is gone. The jobs are also gone with them, and we may not see it return. But we're going to dig deep, and we're going to look at all of our areas that we are responsible for individually and as a collective to see what we can do to answer this question of competitiveness. And I think if we continue to be sharp in those 3 areas of operations, finance, policy, and regulatory, we've got a chance to do some good work.
Thank you. Bill Mongaluzzo, Journal of Commerce, asks, what is your long-term plan to protect market share as sourcing in Asia shifts from China to Southeast Asia, a region where East Coast ports have a logistics advantage?
I talked a little bit about this at our last press conference, Bill, but it's an extremely important question here today once again. I have stated that in addition to the market share loss that we have faced since year 2002, that we will again lose another 15% of our import market share permanently based on the trade policies out of Washington. It takes 7 Vietnams to make up for China. For every new container we earn from Southeast Asia, we lose 3 from China. It is easier to move cargo from Southeast and South Asia westbound via the Suez Canal to ports on the East and Gulf Coast that are less expensive and less regulated. But I'm not going to cry about all this. If this is the rule set that we must deal, then we are going to. I, long time ago, announced a goal that I wanted to get to 10 million TEUs here at the Port of Los Angeles. And while we would scrape and chase for every import container, I think our real opportunities lie in the export markets. And as outlined last time, if we can better balance our trade compared to what we have historically been known for, I think we can reduce our cost to serve, which may make us, if I'm right, a more attractive trade gateway for the logistics decision maker. By doing that, I also think we play a role in helping bring people back to work quicker. The U.S. Department of Labor says that export jobs on average in the United States pay 17% more than all other jobs in the country. I think that's an interesting note as we focus on exports. And however we get to our next milestone of 10 million TEUs, it puts more people to work throughout our logistics supply chain and that of our customers.
Thank you. The next question is from Matt Leonard, Supply Chain Dive. We've heard reports that capacity cuts by ocean carriers have led an increase in demand relative to capacity, which has resulted in longer transit times as shippers jostle for the space that is left on the market. Does this reflect what you are seeing? How does this play out on the port side when it comes to storage and equipment?
The carriers are doing their very best to forecast demand with their customers and balance capacity to do just that. And thus far, what we've seen is a little better balancing as we've hit our summer months. As I mentioned in previous press conferences, our first quarter witnessed 40 canceled sailings. That represented about 25% of the vessel calls that we had expected in the first 3 months of the year. In the second quarter, we had 23 canceled sailings. Now in July, we are estimating 2, and August, 2 canceled sailings. So I think the liner companies are doing a very good job of trying to balance capacity on the supply side with the demand forecast they're receiving from their customers. There will always be bumps along the way. There will always be bottlenecks. And I can tell you from the folks that we're talking to at the C-suite level of the liner shipping companies, they are working around the clock to level set that work with their customers, try to alleviate the bottlenecks and congestion, and especially at Asia origin, making sure that space constraints are designed for that specific demand forecast. But this is something, as always, the industry has to watch very closely. I don't see any bottlenecks right now. In fact, I've talked to this group and others about how we put a drone in the air at least once a week here at the Port of Los Angeles from a public safety perspective to make sure everything is moving in coordination by the outline of our head of public safety, Port Police Chief Tom Gazy, and our allied agencies. As you can see from this drone footage, which was taken just yesterday here at the Port of Los Angeles, we have plenty of room on our terminal tarmacs to grow when the American economy is ready to begin to slowly reemerge. We also see that there is room to grow in areas of trying to earn more business on the export side. But at the same time, this aerial footage gives us a unique vantage point of the work on our ships, our rail and truck connectors. And as evidenced by the declining turn times here in the harbor area, we do not see bottlenecks, nor do we see any pileups of empty containers waiting to go back to Asia. It seems like a long time ago, but we did make a call based on what we saw in our forecasting to have the necessary ship capacity to bring empties back to Asia. And while June was a bit stronger, that pre-positioning of empties from Los Angeles back to Asia, in small part, helped keep this pendulum moving without drastic swings back and forth. So again, this is something we watch every day, whether we're communicating with our terminal customers, liner shipping companies, or our BCO colleagues. And at the same time, we're keeping a bird's eye view on the situation as often as possible through Chief Gazy's leadership.
Thank you. The next question is from Eric Hines at City News Service. Do you have any economic forecasts considering the current relations with China and the executive orders discussed yesterday by the Trump administration?
Disappointing. We understand from the administration of Washington that there is no interest in a phase 2 trade deal. The lofty goals that were set in the phase 1 deal are falling very short of expectation. I've reported to you before that there's an estimated $34 billion worth of sales on the agriculture side that needs to take place before the end of September, and we're tracking somewhere between $8 and $10 billion. And while every now and then there's a surge in a quick purchase, we're not going to see that level of expectation hit. The two largest economies in the world need to work together. and as trading partners. And through this bilateral series of negotiations and isolating ourselves, we seem to have given sales leads to every other trading nation in the world. Brazil's soybean sales are skyrocketing because they're filling a void of what we've done here. Now, again, there is work to do to make our commodities more important to overseas trading partners, not just reconnecting as our economy opens up, but finding emerging markets and new customers for our BCOs in the areas of ag, manufacturing broadly, the automotive and tiered suppliers. We've got to hustle. And we have got to help this American economy recover. And if it has to do with a new playing field that I've outlined before, we're simply going to roll up our sleeves and continue to go to work.
Thank you. Paul Avery from World Cargo News. Does the port have a system in place for contract tracing for any longshoreman that tests positive for COVID-19 within a short time after their last shift?
Yes. And this has been a true collaboration between the International Longshore and Warehouse Union International Leadership in San Francisco, led by International President Willie Adams, CEO of the Pacific Maritime Association, Jim McKenna, and the work that we've been trying to do here in the Los Angeles area. We've only had a very small number of positive tests on the longshore side, and folks have been quickly quarantined, then put into isolation, tested, and followed the necessary medical expert advice that has been required from the Centers of Disease Control, as well as the Los Angeles County Health Services. We have not missed one work of shifts yet since this pandemic hit the United States shores. At the same time, we've done the work here at the Harbor Department, where we've had and have publicly noticed only 9 cases out of more than 900 employees to date. And those series of protocols are followed: deep cleaning, contact tracing, quarantine to isolation, testing, and recovery. I'm also very proud to announce today that on behalf of Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti, Los Angeles Fire Chief Terrasas, as well as Chief Gazy and myself, we will be testing 500 longshore men and women, along with marine terminal operators and members of the PMA here at the Port of Los Angeles tomorrow, Thursday, July 16th. I wish it could be more right off the bat, but this is a first test and another service of the city of Los Angeles to help our critical workers, our longshore women and men, make sure that they are healthy to be on the job. Now, again, we've got a large group of workers that go on the job every day. We're going to start with 500, and it's going to be folks that are not feeling well, may have been in contact, or otherwise possibly have underlying conditions to go through this testing protocol. But I am so proud of what our fire department and our mayor have stepped up to do at the recommendation of Chief Gazy and myself. We're going to give this a shot. And I also have to give great credit to Local 13 President Ramon Ponce de Leon, Local 63 President Mike Perdue, and Local 94 President Danny Miranda for leading the way on this groundbreaking event that we will hold here at the Port of Los Angeles tomorrow. It's just another step into doing things right and getting them right here at the Port of LA.
Thank you. We have an unidentified caller that says, regarding your role as the city's chief logistics officer, is the city continuing to purchase personal protective equipment, PPE? Where are these supplies being sent?
Yes, we are, and very proud of our distribution network so far. Please remember, as I've announced to this group before, we quickly set up what is equivalent to a new city department shortly after Mayor Garcetti asked me to become the city's first ever chief logistics officer, concurrently with my work as port director on March 31st. Since then, we have been scrambling, running down nearly 1,000 leads, and we have created some direct-to-manufacturer contract relationships, including the one with the iconic American Honeywell Corporation. We have begun to distribute PPE out to no less than 30 hospitals in and around Los Angeles and our county. We are continuing to scour all of our sales leads to find those critical PPE supplies, such as the nitrile exam gloves, $3 million for those that know this part of the work. We're also looking for level 2 isolation gowns, in addition to a whole host of other products, as based on the information we're getting from our core advisory team under the Hospital Association of Southern California and so many private and public sector hospital companies who are reaching out to coach us up on exactly what they need. There's more work to do. The volunteer spirit here at the Port of Los Angeles continues, and we are so proud to help in any way we can through this Chief Logistics Office.
Thank you. Eric Watkins, Lloyd's List, follows up with this. Compliance with state, local, and port regulations governing emissions is an expensive undertaking and clearly adds to the cost of putting a box through the port. Do competing ports have similarly high levels of compliance? If not, is the expense of such standards in California contributing to the erosion of port volumes to competing facilities?
It's a good question, Eric, and very thoughtful. It costs more to do business in California, period. And that is no different from our industry. While I don't want to use my energy to point fingers and make excuses, by putting this team together on the West Coast, we are analyzing every facet of our business, and by keeping it as simple as possible to go to market. Again, focused on our operations. What could we do better? What could we do different? An idea in this area is moving chassis off terminals to neutral property on port facilities so we can allow truckers to move in and out of terminals much more quickly than they do today. Some of this has already been done, especially at LBCT over in Long Beach, to great success. We'd like to replicate those best practices. Being able to peel off and drive large swaths of cargo out to the IE for distribution locally is also a way I think we could manage 1/3 of our cargo better than we do today. And that Inland Empire series of warehouses and distribution centers, those omni-channels I mentioned earlier, account for nearly 1/3 of all the cargo on the import side of our business. It's a very important part of the work that we do. On the finance side, as I mentioned, we've got to get our fair share of federal funding. We've also we must continue to commit to investing through cycle. And as I reported last time here at the Port of Los Angeles, we continue with more than $367 million of bricks and mortar infrastructure projects, keeping more than 3,000 construction workers on the job at our lowest ebb in this economic travail that we witness today. And lastly, on the policy side, we have to be aligned. I'll repeat for the second time. I don't want to roll back on environmental commitments, but it's that balancing act that we need to have going forward on the jobs creation side, business development, as well as making sure we continue to lead the world in environmental stewardship. Let's not make excuses for what's gone wrong in the past. Let's evaluate that, learn from history, and see how we can go to market stronger than ever. And we're coming.
Thank you, Gene. I think we will combine these last two questions. So if anyone has any other questions, please submit them, type them in, or raise your hand. These are both on the economic forecast. Jim Roop from Westwood One asks, can you quantify the 15% drop that you're expecting into any kind of dollar volume, dollars? And also from Eric Martin, can you elaborate on the 2020 forecast? You mentioned that you expect business to bounce back faster than 08-09.
Okay, my numbers are pretty succinct. We take a very data-driven approach here, and my look at 15% of the import loss is exactly the trending we're seeing based on the tariff policies moving cargo out of China to Southeast and South Asia locations. As I've said already, we've seen a collective look at losing more cargo from China than we're gaining from these other locations because of shift in routings westbound via the Suez Canal. That will represent about 15% of our overall import lift. And while the numbers may vary just a little bit, it'll be 15% off the top of the value of imported goods that come through the Port of Los Angeles on an annual basis. By and large, total value is about $300 million, both imports and exports. And I'll break down the imports for you offline. Second, on the question of 2020, as I mentioned in comparison, During the Great Recession, we saw volume levels drop down to where I'm pointing right now, and that's around the 8 million, sub 8 million TEU mark. It took us 10 years to recover that volume. And remember, there's a direct correlation between the amount of containers that we move and the number of jobs we have associated with those containers. And I have said directly, we're not going to wait that long this time around. We may have to roll the dice in certain areas. We may have to be ultra aggressive in others, but we are going to do the best we can to recover quicker than we've been known to do in the past. I've assembled a very high performance team here at the Port of Los Angeles. We have manufactured a very strong financial policy that allows us to invest through cycle, and our commercial and marketing teams are working with the C-suite of executives throughout our industry worldwide. We spend morning till night on these video calls, working with our customers to find ways that we can grow cargo. But we must be attractive to the decision maker to bring the cargo here, and the service providers have to be in lockstep with their customers, the cargo owners. I'm not saying this is going to be easy, nor is it going to be a flip of the switch, but don't bet against us.
Gene, thank you so much. I think this concludes all the questions. So at this point, if there are no others, and I don't see any, we will conclude today's news conference, and we'll be advising you of future updates. We apologize for the early audio glitch, but we did get it under control. And thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity each month, and will continue to give us as much information as you require. Stay safe. Till next time, thank you.